You wake up and your throat feels like sandpaper. Your lips are cracking. The sun hasn't even reached its highest point yet, and you can already feel your brain starting to fog. This is the Kalahari Desert, 100,000 years ago, and you have exactly one job today. Find water or die trying. Sounds impossible, right? A landscape stretching in every direction with nothing but sand, thorn bushes, and heat shimmering off rocks. No rivers, no lakes, no wells. And yet human beings didn't just survive here. They thrived here for hundreds of thousands of years. So how did they do it? You're about to find out, and trust me, some of these methods are so clever they'll make you question everything you thought you knew about primitive people. The people who mastered the desert. Let's start with the most famous desert survivors in the archaeological record, the San people of the Kalahari, sometimes called the Kung. Anthropologist Richard Lee spent years living among the San in the 1960s, and what he documented completely rewrote our understanding of hunter-gatherer life. Lee found that the San weren't scraping by on the edge of starvation like early researchers assumed. They had a deep, almost encyclopedic knowledge of their environment that let them find water in places you would walk right past without a second glance. What made Lee's fieldwork so groundbreaking wasn't just the survival techniques themselves, it was the timing data. He calculated that San adults spent roughly 2 to 3 days a week securing food and water for their entire band. That number stunned anthropologists in the 1960s because it directly contradicted the assumption that hunter-gatherers lived in constant, desperate scarcity. If anything, the desert rewarded knowledge far more than it punished the absence of technology. Method 1. Plants as living water bottles. Here's method number 1, and it's going to blow your mind. Plants as water bottles. The San didn't just eat the sama melon, they used it as a canteen that grew itself. This wild melon, scattered across the desert floor, holds gallons of slightly bitter but perfectly drinkable liquid inside its flesh. During certain seasons, San foragers could walk for miles without carrying a single drop of water, because the desert itself was hiding thousands of these melons just beneath the sand's surface, visible only if you knew exactly what color and shape to look for. Children were taught to recognize sama melons almost as soon as they could walk. Identifying the plant wasn't abstract classroom knowledge, it was survival literacy, taught through direct observation on long walks with parents and older siblings. A child who couldn't distinguish a ripe sama from a poisonous look-alike vine was a child at real risk, so this kind of environmental education began early and was reinforced constantly through daily practice rather than formal instruction. Method 2. Sip wells and the art of patience. But melons don't grow everywhere, and dry seasons could stretch for months. So what did you do when even the sama melons dried up? You dug. Not randomly, strategically. This is method number 2. Sip wells. Certain roots, some buried over a meter deep, stored water like biological sponges. The San would locate a specific vine on the surface, follow its root system straight down through packed sand, and pull out a swollen tuber packed with moisture. Then came the genius part. They'd hollow out a small pit, place a straw made from a reed or grass stem into the pulped root, and literally suck the water out drop by drop through a filtering system of grass and sand that removed dirt and pulp. It could take an hour to get a single mouthful, but that mouthful could keep you alive another day. Digging a sip well wasn't a solo task either. It typically required patience, physical stamina, and a level of trust between group members who took turns extracting the water while others rested or kept watch for predators drawn to the same scarce resource. In a landscape where a lioness might be tracking the exact same scent of moisture, digging a well was as much a social operation as a technical one. Method 3. The ostrich egg canteen. Now here's method number 3, and it's one of the most ingenious storage systems in human history, the ostrich egg canteen. Long before ceramic pots or metal flasks, desert foragers across southern Africa were emptying ostrich eggs, cleaning the shells, and using them as portable water containers. A single ostrich egg could hold close to 1.5 liters of liquid. Groups would fill dozens of these shells after rare rains or successful digging expeditions, then bury them in hidden caches beneath the sand, marking the locations with subtle surface clues only they could recognize. A particular arrangement of stones, a bent branch, a marked tree root. Weeks later, traveling through the same stretch of desert, they'd dig up their own stockpile like withdrawing cash from a hidden bank account. Some of these buried shell caches, discovered by archaeologists, still contained residue proving they'd been used exactly this way tens of thousands of years ago. What's remarkable is the engineering behind the shell itself. A small hole was drilled at one end, just wide enough to pour water in and later suck it back out, then sealed with a plug of grass, wax, or clay, depending on the region. It's essentially a prehistoric thermos, lightweight, durable, and naturally insulated against the heat by the shell's dense structure. Reading the land like a map. This is where tracking expert Louis Liebenberg's research becomes fascinating. Liebenberg has spent decades studying sand trackers, and he argues their observational skills go far beyond finding animals. They applied the exact same reasoning to finding water. Reading subtle changes in vegetation color, noticing where certain insects gathered, watching which direction birds flew at dusk. Birds, especially, were a walking map. A specific finch or dove flying low and fast in the same direction at the same time every evening was heading toward water, and desert survivors knew exactly which species to watch and when. Which brings us to method number 4, reading the animals like a GPS system. Certain antelope species, especially gemsbok, could survive for extended periods without drinking by pulling moisture from plants. But they still needed water eventually, and when they found it, humans paid close attention. Tracking fresh spoor toward denser vegetation, watching for converging animal trails that all funneled toward a single point meant you weren't just guessing where water might be. You were following thousands of years of ecological knowledge condensed into footprints and behavior patterns. Liebenberg has even argued that this style of deductive tracking, observing evidence, forming a hypothesis, testing it against new evidence, may represent one of the earliest forms of systematic scientific reasoning in human history. Long before anyone wrote down a formal method, desert trackers were practicing something close to it every single day, simply to stay alive. A global pattern, not a local accident. Now, let's step outside the Kalahari for a moment, because this wasn't a uniquely African skill set. Indigenous Australians in the central and western deserts developed remarkably similar techniques independently, digging soakages in dry riverbeds and tapping water, storing roots, almost identical in function to the sand's sip wells, despite having no contact with southern Africa for tens of thousands of years. That kind of convergent problem-solving tells you something important. These weren't random cultural quirks. They were the predictable result of human intelligence meeting extreme environmental pressure. Anthropologist Polly Weissner, known for her research on social networks and resource-sharing systems among the San, has emphasized something crucial that applies globally. Survival in extreme environments wasn't just about individual genius. It was about massive, interconnected social systems that shared water knowledge across generations and across group boundaries. Certain water holes were considered sacred meeting points precisely because water access was tied to relationships, trust, and reciprocity between different bands. You didn't just need to know where water was, you needed to be part of a social network that would tell you. Method 5. Memory as the ultimate survival tool. This is method number 5, and it might be the most important one of all. Shared memory as survival technology. Water sources in deserts aren't static. Rain patterns shift. Wells dry up. Water holes fill with silt. Surviving required constantly updated, community-wide knowledge passed down through storytelling, songs, and direct mentorship between elders and younger generations. Losing that social network could be just as deadly as losing a water source itself. This is also where symbolic thought enters the picture. Long before written maps existed, early humans were already recording meaning through images. The painted caves of Chauvet in France, dated to over 30,000 years ago, show that our ancestors were capable of encoding complex observations, animal behavior, seasonal patterns, spatial relationships, into symbolic form long before agriculture or writing existed. While Chauvet itself isn't a desert site, it reveals the same underlying cognitive tool that let desert foragers thrive: the ability to compress hard-won environmental knowledge into a transmissible form, whether that's a painted bison on a cave wall or a story told at a fire about where the sama melons grow after the first rain. Why this still matters. So when you think about early humans crossing deserts on their journeys out of Africa tens of thousands of years ago, understand this. They weren't wandering blindly into wastelands. They were engineers of survival, reading landscapes like living maps, using biology as technology long before anyone had invented a single tool made of metal. Every buried ostrich shell, every sipwell straw, every melon harvested at exactly the right moment represents thousands of years of trial, error, and shared wisdom. The Sand People didn't just survive the Kalahari. They mastered it so completely that outsiders who stumbled into the same desert without that knowledge often didn't survive more than a few days. So next time you complain about forgetting your water bottle at the gym, remember this. Somewhere in the Kalahari, someone's ancestors turned an entire desert into a walk-in refrigerator, using nothing but plants, animal behavior, buried shells, and generations of shared knowledge. Takeaway. That's not primitive. That's genius. Human intelligence has never been about the tools we hold. It's about the knowledge we pass on.